Good evening. I call this meeting to order. We have one item on the agenda today, which is LTAC recommendations. I want to welcome Cliff Long from our Economic Development Department.
Thank you, President Perez. Members of council, it's an honor to be with you this evening. If you'll allow me to share my screen, I'll walk through a brief presentation and then we can entertain any questions that the council may have. Can everybody see that okay? Perfect. So tonight we're here to talk about the recommendations of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for its 2021 funding allocations. As you know, any city or county in the state of Washington has the ability to levy a hotel motel tax of up to 2%. And this applies to Airbnbs, bed and breakfasts, hotels, motel rooms, RV parks, and any other lodging accommodations for less than 30 days. And by state law, we're required to put together an advisory committee to help us decide how best to spend those funds collected on behalf of the lodging industry. Our Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for this year is chaired by Councilmember Corman. The members include Angela Moza, Kathy Martinez, Jeff Kelly, Minka Soni, Pina Perpero, and Preeti Sridhar. So the eligible uses of the lodging tax funds are for tourism marketing, the marketing and operations of special events and festivals that are designed to attract tourists to our community, operations and capital expenditures of tourism-related facilities that are owned or operated by a municipality or government entity, and that also allows the repayment of bonds from these funds. Or if the visitor center, for example, is owned and operated by a nonprofit organization, the lodging tax advisory funds can be used to fund the operations, but can't be used for capital expenses. So eligible applicants for these funds include convention and visitors bureaus, destination marketing organizations, nonprofits, including Main Street organizations, lodging association, chambers of commerce, and then government entities defined as municipalities. So our application process for this year, the committee met on October 5th and approved an application and a timeline for granting these funds. The applications were due on November 30th, and we received 14 different applications. The committee heard presentations on December 3rd from a number of the applicants and conducted a debriefing after the interviews to finalize its recommendations. So the committee has recommended that it set aside $25,000 to support community events through sponsorships. These are hosted by nonprofits with limited budgets, but as a sponsorship, don't carry the same requirements for the tracking of room nights and that kind of thing, but we consider them marketing opportunities and fund them that way. The committee has recommended that Renton Farmers Market, the Renton Multicultural Festival, Renton River Days, the Tasvere Arts Festival, and Renton Downtown Partnership each get a $5,000 sponsorship for the events that they applied for this year. In terms of the full grant process, the committee is recommending the funding of these 10 organizations in the following amounts. The Renton Chamber of Commerce for the operation of the Visitor Center at $150,000. The Community Marketing Campaign at $100,000. The Sangam Festival for $40,000. Again, the sponsorships that we talked about for $25,000. The Northwest Entertainment Foundation to do their King Con, which used to be the RenCon Comic-Con Festival, for $25,000. Real Renton to do another version of the Seattle Film Summit at $25,000. Empowering to do their 2021 Women's Show at $20,000, and $20,000 to do their North American Fashion Week program. Renton Downtown Partnership has a direct marketing package that they're going to do, and that was approved for $15,000. And then a group called the Washington State Geocaching Association put in a small request for $1,500, making the total recommendations $421,500. So the recommendation for council action this evening, this will be on your consent agenda. Staff is recommending that you support the recommendations of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee to allocate that $421,500 as presented, and additionally that the mayor and city clerk are allowed to execute the contracts to expend those approved and budgeted funds. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cliff. Council members, do you have any questions or comments? Councilmember Benedetti.
Thank you so much, Cliff. Really appreciated you going through all of that with us. So understanding that at least a good portion of next year will be very different, how have these organizations adapted their events to what might be virtual space, and will that change the funding at all?
That's an excellent question. One of the reasons that we had a good surplus in the fund this year is, quite frankly, a lot of the events, most of the events that were recommended for 2020 didn't happen. And these funds are given on a reimbursement basis. So if the event doesn't happen, the funds aren't spent. So we built up a fund balance. We recognize that some of these events may end up becoming virtual events, and we're putting specific language in our contracts this year to ask if there's any changes that they report back to the committee prior to the event, so that we know what will happen. And the other thing to note is most of the events that were approved this year are heavily weighted towards the back half of the year. So not a lot of spring and summer events in this mix. Most of them are late summer and fall events.
Thank you so much, Cliff.
Sure.
Councilmember Benedetti. Anybody else? Well, I see none. I want to thank you, Cliff, and I also want to thank Councilmember Corman, that I know that this year he was part of also the LTAC group. And anything to add, Councilmember Corman?
Yes. Thank you, Council President. It was certainly an unusual year. We had to pivot several times. It was obviously discouraging, as it was just across the board this year for a lot of things. But as events got canceled, but I will say that the meeting where we actually worked on these funding recommendations for next year was more optimistic. As Cliff explained, we feel like we're poised with some great events as what predicted to be sort of the ending of the pandemic and the recession, maybe halfway through the year. So we, as well as we had awareness that our downtown was going to be completed, and we'd start being able to have more events down there as well. So we've really loaded the schedule up with some events to sort of help our city get restarted. And there's lots of language built in just in case that doesn't happen the way we're hoping to, so the funds will still be preserved. But I feel like the entire committee, everybody on the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, worked well together. We reached all of these by consensus, and there were some events we would have liked to, where people were asking for a little bit more money, but I'm sure people understand the lean times. We did try and keep everything going and get us a great running start as the pandemic lifts. So hopefully that all comes to be.
Thank you, Councilmember Corman. So if there are no more questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.